So, hi everyone. I'm here with John Welsh today. He's the co-founder of Trueworth AI, and Trueworth AI are in the sort of like in the process improvement, process transformation with kind of that AI flavor, and you just sort of do that for businesses, really. So, John, thanks very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone.
So I suppose you're sort of involved in this AI kind of space, and there's been a huge amount of chat about it over the last sort of couple of years. I mean, how do you think it's kind of changed, and where do you think we are with it as we sort of sit there today?
Yeah, so I think let's face it, it's in the everyday lexicon of everybody at the moment, and obviously there's a lot of press, a lot of chat. Everyone's kind of heard of ChatGPT and things like that, and that's actually a good example of how I think AI and that space has changed.
Mm.
I think the first thing to say is obviously the pace of change, is incredible. I mean, the only thing that I can, I've been in and around technology for about 25 years now. It's simply the quickest changing thing that I've ever seen. If you think about, it's grown to, a couple of billion users, many times faster than the internet ever did. So to just put it into some kind of context for people. But the way I think it's changed is that AI itself isn't a new thing. AI, machine learning, and some of the technologies that underpin this, have been around, for decades. What has changed from 3 or so years ago was the kind of implementation or the release of ChatGPT, which gave you a kind of nice front end on it that anyone could go on and use and ask it a question. So if that's where we started, where are we today? I think today we are at a bit of an inflection point, if you like. So I think 2/3 of people globally now have gone on and used some kind of AI, so ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever their particular flavor is. But now I think we're at an inflection point where AI is now changing from a kind of discipline that's practiced or implemented in highly specialized areas, large R&D departments of huge corporate companies, with 7, 8, 9-figure budgets, and a team of PhD people, to actually becoming a little bit more commoditized. And what it's doing is it's moving away from that kind of, here's an answer engine. And it's a very good answer engine nowadays. You can, as sure most people do, can log on and ask ChatGPT, where's best for me to go on holiday, or, specifics of a particular regulation, or whatever your particular use case is. And it's got very good, it's got very good at answering those questions. Where I think we are now, though, is that tipping point where it's now moving away from being an answer engine to actually starting to be able to do economically viable work. Okay, and as a result, organizations need to think about it a little bit differently. I think 2026 will be very much a year, and a lot of organizations have already started to look at this and what have you. And obviously, you've got a number of examples of organizations implementing this either internally or externally with varying degrees of success and varying results. But now 2026, I think, is going to be about that shift from a proof of concept to a proof of value. Okay, so this is the year where I genuinely believe that we're going to stop talking about AI as if it's magic, as if it's this kind of dark art, or I could just put anything I like in, or I can ask it for life advice, or I could do this, that, and the other. This kind of a little bit gimmicky, I think, for a lot of use cases. But actually, how does that now change from being this curiosity to actually providing real value for people and for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, and how do we think of that practically around like putting that into organizations? Because you say we've all used these large language models and these chat models essentially giving us answers. How does that actually do something useful? I mean, so we can get the information back. I mean, most of us are like summarizing documents or asking questions or finding searches or holidays, those kind of things. How do we enable it to do something useful? Because and actually put that into businesses? I mean, what's the sort of things that people are looking at? Is that things like agents and those kind of things? I mean, how are people actually using it? What's the path to look at?
Yes. So yeah, agents is the word there, definitely. So economically valuable work, I think, comes down to a couple of things. It's how do you have more valuable interactions as the human, as the expert in the loop, and agents are the evolution, and obviously we saw this starting to happen in 2025. There are plenty of kind of agent products. It might be useful actually. So all we're talking about when we say an agent is something, an AI model that's got effectively autonomy and the ability to use tools. Okay, so that's it. However, that's then like giving I don't know, a pair of hands to be able to go off and do things on your behalf. Um, so once you've got that capability, that's fantastic. You have to then start to think differently, though, as an organization about how you're going to use it, about how what opportunities it opens up, what risks it also opens up, because I think, as a lot of people are already aware, but I think organizationally we should be more switched on to this, is that, just because something can do a particular task or perform a particular workflow end to end, should it or should it do it in that particular way? So it's about thinking about, and I always start with this, think about as an organization, ask the kind of what if question. What if we could do this differently?
Mhm.
What if this, was possible or achievable? So start with that outcome. What is our desired outcome, and then work backwards from there. Because you've got so many. I mean, it's not just the speed of kind of intelligence in these models that's been kind of, changing so quickly over the last 3 or so years. Um, but it's also the amount of different models and the amount of tools that you've got, the amount of AI, I mean, Hugging Face, which is a resource for going and downloading AI models that you can use, often for quite specialized tasks. I mean, that's got over 2 million models on there now. So the breadth of this is just staggering. So what you have to do, I think, as an organization is start with the outcome and then work back through your process to say, well, okay, where can AI make an impact on this? Where can agents be able to be introduced to be able to take away that kind of lower value work and amplify your people? So, AI is great, but it's not brilliant at everything. Certainly not at the moment. It will get better and better, but it's not brilliant at everything. So, how do we let humans do more of what they do really, really well? How do we let how do we amplify, employees in a particular organization whilst taking away all of the stuff that people don't particularly want to do, or that the AI or the agents can pick up for them, which therefore makes them more productive and organizationally obviously takes you a number of steps forward.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think of particularly these large language models almost as like being almost like mini helpers to a certain extent. It's like you've got someone who's working for you who maybe needs training, doesn't get everything right yet, and sort of you limited how much they can interact with the organization. Maybe give them a few more tools because they're getting a little bit better and those kind of things. So you have almost like the people helping you out with things. It's an extra pair of hands to be able to do things, to be able to do things, I suppose. But I suppose if
Yeah.
it was, I mean, using that analogy and stretching that analogy, and if it was a person, you think and you put them into a process, you'd want to think, well, like, how do I connect them with the rest of the process? So I've got to take information in, I've got to process it somehow, and then put it out in some sort of structured format. Usually that's, talking and typing, or typing in, rekeying information, it would be those kind of
Yeah.
things, and then putting that back in the process. How do we think about that with automated AI, with sort of like, with these AI models in terms of the interface within our existing process? I mean, particularly around structured data, because a lot of our processes need structured sort of outputs and those kind of things to connect it into the plumbing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Think about these agents right now as a kind of junior member of staff, a member of your team. Okay, they still need direction, they still need training, they still need checking in on to make sure that they're doing what you asked them to do in the first place. But it's an interesting, again, another point of note in terms of the way that things are changing. There are quite a lot of people out there already that use this, and a lot of, shadow AI in organizations is a little bit of a problem, I think, in most, whether the people at the top know it or not.
Yeah.
But actually, this is where AI moves from being a personal productivity assistant to a functioning member of a team.
Mm.
Okay. And as I say, as with all of, you've got a new team member. Well, how do they know what to do in the first place? How do you put a framework in place to make sure that you've got the right outputs and that they're doing the right thing and doing it in the right way? Okay. And that's where things like, good initial design, good architecture, good guardrails, and everything like that start to come into play. You mentioned data. Data is huge as a part of that. And I don't think that most organizations have got their data in a way that's actually going to be going to give them the best outcome or to leverage the tool set that they've got if they start to bring AI tools into the enterprise. Then you need that data to really be sorted out in the first place, because you can have the most intelligent person in the world on your team. If you feed them incorrect or bad data and just say go and do this without checking it, then actually you're not going to get the outcome that you want, is the likely scenario. Now that problem also then compounds, because actually a great way that organizations ought to start thinking about the processes that they want to automate, that they want to add AI tool sets into, is this kind of compound systems, whereby you have an agent that specializes in one particular thing. It might be interfacing with a customer, it might be data collection, it might be whatever it is, and then passing it off to another agent that's really, really good at analyzing that information, or really, really good at going and fixing a bug, or really, really good at whatever it might be. And actually, if your source data is incorrect, then what you have is it's not just a compound system, you have a compounding effect of, if you start with bad data, it gets worse and worse as it starts to hand off between different points, and that problem just becomes bigger and bigger, and the likelihood of you getting what you want out the back end of it to the quality level that you want becomes less and less.
I mean, it doesn't remove some of the basics of business that we would do anyway, which are around, I suppose, making sure you have good data, making sure you have a good process, instructing if it was a human, giving them the right instructions, because you've got to ask the right things, and then checking that they've done the job right. I mean, you could replace human with AI throughout any of that, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, that's why it's a really good analogy to think about AI as that kind of junior team member. Over time, and there's a lot of good examples where organizations are using those, for things like customer service and things like that. Again, we've all seen some nightmare implementations and examples that have gone viral on the internet to show where it isn't going particularly well, or where it wasn't implemented particularly properly. But yeah, that whole kind of, you've got to go back to first principles, and that's actually the same in terms of when you're doing implementations of these things, because obviously the way that we're talking about this now is it is going to change the future of work. But actually, you still need to look after the people. You still need to go through proper change management. You still need to apply your security and governance considerations to this, even more so when you start to give agency to an AI model. So yeah, that kind of whole, as you say, that you still can't ignore the basics. It's not a silver bullet that just you can go, right, great, we'll give, for instance, everyone, there's a lot of organizations that have done this and are doing this, and I don't think that it's necessarily giving them the best outcome. But you could turn around and say, okay, great, if we turn around and gave ChatGPT business licenses to all of our employees, that would make us 40% more productive. Well, that's not really the way it works, right? Because there's a number of factors that dictate why. But yeah, you still have to go back to your first principles. Like in that instance, you need to make sure that people are trained. You still need to make sure that you've got, data sovereignty controls, for instance, making sure that people aren't lumping sensitive data out there into models, or kind of going off on their own. Well, actually, I don't like GPT, so I'm going to use Claude, that type of stuff. So again, it comes back to a bit of common sense and a bit of the basics that we've all been practicing for years.
So we talked a little bit about this already, I suppose. There are things like governance and sort of compliance, but particularly around governance and making sure you have like policies internally. I mean, we talk about data governance, but we kind of like need AI governance and policies and sort of like, and then checking to enforce the policies. I mean, how evolved do you think organizations are on that? And how much more do we need? Well, I mean, what do we need to do, I suppose?
Yeah. So the governance question is interesting because I don't think organizations are prepared for it by and large, And I also think, and that's not necessarily, any particular any particular fault of anyone in the organization. I think that AI is changing so fast that it's actually quite difficult to keep up. But again, this year, I think we will see that come to the fore, and for a couple of different reasons. I think that the obvious one is the EU AI Act coming into force. Now that has, I won't go into the specifics of it and bore everyone to death, but actually that has effectively that's a way you have to put a risk classification on AI, and I know that obviously we're talking in the UK, but it affects anyone who serves any kind of AI solution out there. The other thing is, though, obviously the UK as well are mooting, an AI bill as well. What's going to be in that? I'm not quite sure. We'll wait and see. But in any case, I think that it's good practice anyway. Not just from if you are obligated to abide by certain regulations, that's one thing. But actually, it's a good idea to look at those principles and to look at, okay, which of those, even if we're not obligated to follow the EU AI Act, for instance, which of those principles are actually good practice for us to start to bring into our organization so that we can ensure that we've got proper controls, proper governance, that we are risk assessing things on a regular basis, to make sure basically that you're going in with your eyes open, as an organization.
And when do you think some of those controls sort of tip over to being sort of onerous and sort of stopping development versus not? And I sort of reflecting on it, it's like just how quickly things have moved forward. I mean, you remember the AI video of Will Smith eating spaghetti, right? So this came up this week, and like just how far it's come along. They got a new picture of him basically cooking spaghetti and making the sauce and everything, and it's just night and day difference. In 2 years, it's night and day difference, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing has moved so fast. And you look at the AI Act, and legislation often is based off the way it was 2 years ago. Even talk around hallucinations, it not being correct. I mean, we were all very concerned about this like a couple of years ago, and now like we've just kind of accepted
really
it. I mean, it was going to change. It was going to like, and now it doesn't really come up so much. I mean, it's like, do you think it's sort of constraining development, or how do we make sure that this stuff is common sense and stuff we should do anyway, versus just being a knee-jerk reaction to new technologies actually constraining development?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point actually. Because I mean, let's face it, historically, legislation has not done particularly well keeping up with technological advancements, has it? It's but I think from a legislature point of view, it's always going to be behind. However, that doesn't stop you as an organization, as an enterprise, doing the right thing and doing the sensible thing. Because I think that, you saw it with the to and froing of the various different bills that were trying to be passed in the States, right? And obviously the States has got, gone on the side of, won't quite call it the Wild West, but it's obviously, it's open, and there's very little in the way of actual legislation that impacts in reality. However, whatever happens with, obviously, we need to make sure that we comply with any applicable legislations or laws around it. But organisationally, you need to you're presented with a challenge, actually, because again, because of the pace of change, and actually, this comes on to how you should start to deliver AI. I genuinely believe that you cannot take a traditional kind of business transformation approach. All right, we've got a 12-month, 24-month delivery plan, a business transformation plan for our kind of technology suite. I genuinely don't think that works anymore in the kind of AI age. So it's a balancing act, right? You've got to be able to make sure that you protect what's important, protect your employees, protect what makes your business unique, but also then have enough of a kind of a playground, enough of enough looseness in there to be able to make sure that you're not going to stifle creativity, you're not going to stifle new developments, or being able to take advantage of new technology. And again, that's some common sense. One of the things that organizations could look to do that is, I mentioned sandbox. Well, actually, you could provide for whichever staff were involved in it, you could provide a safe space, a safe area to be able to play about with new AI tech, to have a load of synthesized data in there that's not actual, no PII in there, no kind of corporate sensitive data in there or anything like that, and then people can kind of get their hands on, play about, do these kind of experiments in there, see what's possible, and then if they hit on something that's brilliant or that they think that is going to have a big impact on the business, then great. Then you go through a series of stages, a series of gates to make sure that it is secure and safe and reliable and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's going to become even more important as I say, I think the future is going to be, not just giving people access to one AI tool. There are going to be more and more specialized AI tools, more and more kind of, of this kind of AI spaghetti, if you like, which it is at the moment, where you might be using one thing, I've done something else that helps me in my day-to-day job, and various other members of the team have done the same, and that's really, really difficult to control. That's really, really difficult to kind of oversee. So having a framework that allows for flex, that allows for creativity, that allows for experimentation in a safe way, I think is the way forward. But then having still a structured and sensible process that goes through that makes sure that governance, safety, security, reliability, all that kind of stuff is in place is absolutely critical too.
I mean, if I go back to that, I suppose the analogy of like, someone who's just joined your company, a junior member of the company sort of joining, being able to give them tasks, it almost feels like we would know what to do with that. So we have segregation of duties, we give them specific training for certain areas. They can only access certain things. Maybe they don't get access to customer accounts, or they can't make payments or whatever it is. And it's almost like the danger comes almost like when you have that person then becomes the super employee that can do everything. So they can make payments, and so all that segregation of duties sort of breaks down. And then if they make a mistake, they make a mistake everywhere. So I just wonder if actually we know what to do as humans, because we've done this throughout history, is having lots of different little models everywhere, all with controls, all with training, just like we would with employees as an organization. And we use that to basically control this spaghetti, but that's just what an organization is. It's a spaghetti of human beings, right?
Yeah. So it's a bunch of different people doing different things that they're supposed to be good at, right? And that's what it boils down to. I absolutely agree. And again, that's why the analogy works in terms of, you wouldn't just trust that a new person coming in that says that they have a degree in this, that says they've got 20 years experience doing that, you wouldn't just go, fine, you get on with it then. You've got access to everything, you get on with it and do what you say you can do. You wouldn't trust that. You would put a framework in place to manage it. And it's exactly the same. You can think about it exactly the same with AI. And part of what I think also needs to happen as part of all that is that you need, traceability and observability as well. So observability, seeing what's actually going on at the moment, but also traceability. So be able to audit, what's going on. And especially when AI is still this kind of, black box technology, and there's not a lot of people that really understand what's going on beneath the hood. Well, actually, as models become more advanced and they've started reasoning or thinking models, and then they make decisions on what tools to use or where to go next or where to go and find this bit of information from. The ability to be able to audit that or observe it during, but then audit it afterwards is absolutely critical in making sure that you can, deliver what you want to deliver to the quality level that you want to deliver safely.
Going back to models, I suppose, where's the balance, I suppose, between these almost like these online sort of cloud-based sort of general models that are out there? So you mentioned Claude as an example, ChatGPT, Gemini, those sort of things, versus and using bespoke versions of those, or corporate versions of those, versus using, say, open source as an example. You mentioned Hugging Face kind of models there. I mean, how have you sort of seen that evolve? And do you think? I mean, I was certainly hearing sort of like there's a from a corporate that's quite controllable if you have your own open source kind of models sort of sitting on your own server versus these large sort of generic kind of models. I mean, what are you
Yeah.
sort of seeing with trends there?
Yeah, so I think that whilst those frontier lab models, the cloud-based, you say Claude's, ChatGPTs, whilst they are fantastic, they're brilliant, and again, the where they've come up to now, and the tools that they're building into them, and the connectors that you can plug in, again, whether you should or not, whether you're ready to or not, is another matter. But they're absolutely fantastic. However, where I see the trend is I see actually we're going to go towards small language models. Again, these specialist models that can be more easily trained on your particular data, on your particular use case, be able to, say, then effectively daisy chains or put in a team of these small models, each that are really good at doing that one or two, particular things. There's a couple of different reasons for that. One is, as I say, it gives organizations back an element of control. And also it allows you to be able to run them, from your own domain, from your own, enterprise as well. The smaller models are obviously, use less in terms of resources and compute and things like that. So actually, that then makes it possible to bring it inside your VPC or inside your domain, so that again, it's another level of control that you're not sending potentially sensitive data across the internet. A true with AI, we've done implementations of both for various different organizations, and again, it's about assessing what you want the outcome to be, what the use case is, and then fitting the best model for that, or models for that particular job. And that's also what the small language models allow you to do. It means that you don't have to go, right, we are going to hang our hat on OpenAI and the fact that, that's it, we're an OpenAI house now. It is about, well, okay, this particular model, so I don't know, maybe something for assessing particularly specialized type of source code. Well, actually, the ChatGPT model might not be brilliant at that, but there might be something on Hugging Face, which after going through due process and due diligence on it, might say, well, actually, that's going to give us better results. So let's take that and use that. But then for the rest of the stuff around it, we might use something else. It might be, and we've implemented stuff where it's, there's highly sensitive data that does not leave the enterprise whatsoever. So actually, we've got implementations that will do a load of processing and activity locally, but then actually need to go out and do web searches on various things, or there is Gemini is particularly good at doing things like deep research, so that we can call that, but you do all the sensitive processing locally and then go out and call Gemini. So The advantage is that we've got, a whole host of tools in the toolbox, and you should be able to find the right tool for the right job. And
Yeah.
that's the principle on which we work.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about models. I mean, what seems to happen, particularly with the large language models and the text models that came out, is I remember fuzzy logic. I remember fuzzy logic, and we used to talk about fuzzy logic. But I mean, it's like super fuzzy logic. I mean, it does text based, right? So you convert something into text, and it gives you a text output, and it seems to do that. But there are these other models out there, like diffusion models, and like which is used for images and video and those kind of things. Well, a lot of the time we seem to be still talking about these like LLM models or these the text-based models. Do you think we'll get into like seeing much more use of the other types of models like image and video and those kind of things because they're out there, but maybe not quite as evolved? I mean, how do you sort of like see the evolution in the industry around that, around image processing as an example, or sound processing, those kind of things that doesn't involve text?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think we will see a surge in it, and I think again, 2025 marked, with things like VO2 released and all that. I think that 2025 marked a big, a turning point in terms of the video and image
Mm,
models. Um, and I think that they are now, the example you referenced before, for instance, I think they're now virtually indistinguishable. Again, if you know what you're doing with it, which is virtually indistinguishable from real life sometimes, which is say both a good thing and a bad thing. However, I think that now the capability is there, we will see more and more use cases proliferating, so that actually organizations will be able to say, well, actually, it's not just us coming up with an image for a LinkedIn post or things like that. There'll be, again, valuable use cases. I mean, I think that to show you how far I think it will go, I think in 2026, and this is supported by a few other people, not just from me, but I think in 2026 you'll start to see, awards. People are going to have to start to think about awards and how they get a portion to AI assisted or AI
yeah.
created media. I think it will go that far. If you just look at the second half of last year and the pace with which those models improved. From an organizational point of view, an enterprise point of view, though, I think that we're using that. We're talking about this like they are different things. Now, obviously, you've had multimodal models for years, and actually, you go into Gemini and you say, right, well, I want to use Nano Banana to create an image or whatever it might be. But actually, I think again, this will be just part of a team. It'll be just part of a team of workers, and actually, you're the graphics designer, or you're
Yeah.
this, or this whole. Well, it doesn't matter, what you throw at a model as an input, whether it's text, whether it's audio, whether it's images or video, and I think that you can have this kind of multi-channel approach or filtering in to put into the same process to drive an outcome. So I think that's where we're going with it.
I mean, there's a lot of talk, I think, over the last couple of weeks around, like, particularly these video models. I mean, they're so good now. You look at them on social media, and they're so good, and you don't know what's real versus what's not.
Yeah.
And there was almost like this accelerated move towards almost like authentication. We're going to come back to governance. I know it's not an exciting topic, but around authentication around data, and this is all the zero trust stuff that's out there as well, which is like, how do I know that that's real versus not? Particularly for things like fraud and those kind of things as well, which because it's I mean, you can clone your voice, you can clone your video. I mean, we could create this video. I mean, we're real. And as far
Honestly.
as I know, you're real. As far as you know, I'm real. And we're kind of real. And it's kind of like, but you could clone it, right? You could create this stuff, and and I suppose it's just that authentication, the provenance, to make sure that that this is real. Could become an issue as well. So or become important.
Yeah, well, I think it already is. Again, you've
Yeah,
got examples that have gone viral about, people sending payments,
yeah,
because the CEOs phoned them up, and so the CEO, as they thought, has phoned them up. Um, but it's interesting on that actually. Again, you come back to, yes, there are, like you say, there's a number of different kind of trust initiatives that are ongoing. That this kind of authentication of video and all this kind of stuff, and digital watermarking and stamping and all that kind of stuff. Um, so there's a number of different high tech things. But actually, I think that what we still should consider is the low tech stuff. So again, it comes back to what we were talking about before in terms of common sense. Well, how do I, how would I do that if it was a person? So let's take that example that I used before of the CEO phoning up someone in accounts and asking them to make a payment of
Mm.
$100,000 to wherever. Um, well, you could have all of the high-tech stuff in the world, and put in this really complex, set of systems that will try to spot, where this is coming from, analyze voice patterns, analyze all this kind of other stuff, digital watermarking, blah blah blah. But actually, you could just as easily put in a process that says, well, any request for money transfer, you put down the phone and you phone them back.
Yeah, yeah,
Something as simple as that. And I'm not saying that will work in every scenario, clearly, but let's also not forget that again, that kind of common sense there with
yeah,
all
yeah.
of this as well. You've got some, still quite emphatic low-tech solutions to some of these high-tech problems that you
Which we've
could
been doing
start
for
to think
years
about.
as well, right? Yeah, we've been
Yeah,
doing these.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 100%, and it needs to go through verification layers and, such and such needs to sign off. And, all the basics, again, it's coming back to the basics that we've learned over the last, however many decades.
Yeah, and I suppose, how ready do you think organisations are? So we talked about, how we put the processes in, different types of models that are there, making sure people understand how they. I mean, what do you think the readiness level is in an organisation around understanding this technology, how it gets used, how to use it and leverage it, like writing prompts or what it'll actually do, and I suppose myth versus reality. I mean, how much of a readiness do you think there is to do that, or
Yeah.
knowledge there is to do that? I mean, is that something we've got to concentrate on?
I think it absolutely is. I think the overall readiness level is low. I think that's probably, but I also think there's a bit of a gap. There's a bit of a gap in that understanding of how ready organizations are as
Yeah,
well. Because if we look at it, we've got a technology here that's actually, pretty high adoption. You've got, as I said before, two-thirds of people, using AI in some form or another. But actually, only about a fifth of people were self-confessed to using it a lot. And that's even not to say that they're any good at it or they're
yeah.
experts at it or what have you. Um, so I think organizational readiness is quite low on that scale because I think there's a lack of understanding. I think there's a difficulty, as we discussed before, about keeping pace with it. Um, I think there's, as we talked about, there's a challenge with governance, security, and guardrails. And I think that will, unfortunately, I think that will come out this year. I think we'll almost have a black swan moment this year where it gets something extremely wrong. Where say it's not actually AI is just a tool. It's the people that implement it. It's the people that design the process and the architecture around it that will have gotten it wrong. But I think there will be a black swan moment that will bring all of this, right into to the kind of front of people's minds. Um, but I also think that the people in organizations typically aren't ready for how their work's going to change. I think that there's, as we move from what we described before, which is this kind of question and answer, chatbot type approach to this more agentic world of work, then I don't think people understand how much that's going to impact, and so how do you make sure that your people still retain critical thinking, for instance? How do you make sure that your people have got the ability to be able to challenge, to be able to manage these? Because actually, that's where I think a lot of knowledge workers will end up shifting. They were shifting away from doing the actual work to managing that team of AI agents that we were describing before. So again, to stretch the analogy almost to breaking point, but you can imagine that if I'm a manager in an organization, I've got a team of 10 AI agents working for me, and it's my job to make sure that I not only set their goals correctly, but also then check that they're doing it in the way that I want it to, in accordance with company policy, for instance. So I think that people are quite underprepared for that shift.
Yeah, I just wonder how. how underprepared we are, and just like how much it's going to change. For example, be it media creation. I was thinking back to the days of medieval calligraphy. Right, so they used it in books. Like, I mean, that industry got completely wiped away by the printing press, didn't it? But it wasn't like people. I mean, there's still some artists who ended up doing it, but some people, but it largely went away. And so we do that as almost as a hobby or as a specialist kind of thing. But people found other things to do. But if you holding on to the fact that I'm going to be a calligrapher forever, then you've got to change with the times and become a printer, right? So, but then you can manage the machines that then do the printing, if you sort of mean. It's that kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You've got plenty of examples of that. Happening. Whether you want to go through your various industrial revolutions or what have you, but obviously you've got plenty of examples of this happening. But I do think that people need to educate themselves a lot more. If you don't do AI will be done to you. And I think it's quite worrying in certain circumstances. So again, what part of what we do at True Worth is going out and providing that education, providing that kind of strategic guidance as well. It's not just about here's how to write a prompt well, or here's what's dangerous if you put in, the entirety of your Google Drive into an LLM or whatever it might be. But it's about that kind of strategic shift, right? It's about that kind of, I've got to move from being a doer of something to being the world's best manager now, and I've got to do it with, it's about people having AI literacy and enterprises having operational literacy. There has to be, and I think there's a huge lack of operational literacy when it comes to AI. And it comes back to what we we're saying right at the top in terms of, it's now incumbent upon organizations to be able to have to think about things differently, to be able to design processes differently, to design processes around the future world of work rather than just automating what we have right now. I personally, I was in, I did quite a lot in the RPA space, 15 years ago, whatever it was. That was literally about what do we do now? And then how do we automate it? These kind of swivel chair activities. You go from a spreadsheet to an email or to, from a CRM to a spreadsheet or whatever it might be. This is different, and we talk about automation, we talk about all this type of stuff, and it is, but it's worlds apart from that type of thinking, and therefore organizations need to be ready for it, which I don't think they particularly are at the moment.
I mean, it does feel like it's accelerating at a huge kind of pace, right? I mean, it's sort of like it's probably just an exponential kind of thing, but for us it seems quite shocking because we think in linear worlds, don't we? So like growth versus exponential. So it does feel like it's continuing accelerating. But what about things like there's a lot of AI generation of material, those kind of things. It can lead to a lot of rubbish that gets generated as well. I mean, what's your kind of view of that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's one of the downsides of the commoditization of AI and the ease with which people can access it and use it. It's a great thing on the one hand, but on the other, in that example, it leads to a lot of AI slop. So, the regular users of LinkedIn will have noticed this a lot. And, you can't always tell, but actually you get, I think the overall quality, I think it's fair to say is declining. However, what that will mean is that I think that human, generation will be priced. So, using the calligraphy example from earlier, yes, you've got, you had a load of people doing medieval calligraphy, that then reduced to just a finite number. But I bet you those finite number, I wasn't around to verify this, but I bet you that a finite number were really bloody good at what they did. Okay, so they were that kind of top echelon, and I think you're going to see something similar. I think that human driven, human generated stuff will potentially be at a premium. I hope that then the AI generated stuff, as people learn about it, as people get more literate with it, will start to improve, and it actually start to become useful. But yeah, I think there's an interesting point there for the future of work, which is let humans do what they are really, really good at doing, or what they enjoy doing a lot more of, and let AI take the strain of the rest of it.
So I agree on that. I mean, I was writing about this the other day, which is I think if you do like if we do generic stuff, and this is where it comes close to some of the stuff we would do, like generic programming could be like, just it's just regular run of the mill kind of programming. It might be, creating presentations, it might be creating music, it might be creating video, all of those kind of things, creating images. I mean, it's not sort of, not talking high end art. I'm talking like just the stuff we would do. A lot of what of us do in the services industry, that stuff is under real pressure because AI can do that stuff, the generic stuff, is well, if not better, and it can do it in like
Yeah.
minutes rather than hours. So, but all AI has to come. I was thinking like all AI has to come from some sort of base information, sort of basic information and a prompt. And so if it's all from the same basic information, it all kind of like feels the same. I mean, it's very good, but it all kind of feels the same. I mean, arguably, it's what we're all doing anyway. But that really unique stuff, a really unique song, a really unique film, a really unique photograph, a really unique, presentation, a unique idea, all that kind of stuff, sort of comes from the imperfect human brain. That
Yeah.
is so I think almost like that core data is going to get more valuable. Like you could argue that it's actually undervalued at the moment. We don't pay enough for these people who are generating this stuff because
Yeah.
we don't value it. But now that's the unique stuff that means that everything else is going to, all the derived stuff is going to be different. And so I think
Yeah,
I think it
absolutely.
rebalance it. I think it's going to rebalance things. It might take 10 years or so.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, 100% agree. And I think, like you say, I think that what it will do is it will prove the value of that kind of human creativity.
Yeah,
Because, like you say, if it's a generic thing, then you can do it, and AI can do it faster, quicker, cheaper, probably better than 99% or
yeah,
95% of the
yeah.
populace, right? Um, but it's interesting because actually, obviously, these large frontier models or frontier labs models are trained on the internet. Well, if there's no more new content being created, that's a little
It's all
bit
gonna
of
be
a
the same. Yeah,
problem,
yeah,
right? From
yeah.
moving it forward. So, in actual fact, again, you still need that kind of human creativity. You need that human input. You need, the humans and agents working in tandem. And as I said before, let the agents do what they're really good at. Let the humans come up with the creative side, and manage it, and set the goals, and so on and so forth. I mean, on a slightly separate note, talking about the internet, I mean, I think that's the other thing that's going to change massively. We're talking a 5, 10 year window, probably less in actual fact. But with the rise of agents, I won't go so far as to say the internet is dead, but it's going to change massively. So most people's interface, most people's point of entry to this information is not going to be direct. It's not going to be through an internet browser. You will hand it over to an agent, and an agent will go and search the internet, whatever other data sources that you give it access to. And therefore, the internet will become effectively an enablement layer for agents to be able to talk to each other.
But it's
We're already
interesting.
seeing some of this actually in terms of this agent. We've got agent to agent protocols that came out last year. We've got this kind of agentic commerce that's now starting to come out. You've got agentic checkout protocols. So actually, it could well be that all people are doing is operating in this AI operating system, I guess, and then they let the agents go out and do the grunt work, and kind of go and find all the deals or whatever it might be, and then potentially even, from a single prompt, you could go and buy a new car or whatever it might be, worryingly.
But I suppose that part of that there is you can say, well, look, I mean, you do all your searches using AI instead of actually browsing the websites and all those kind of things. But the websites probably need to be there as a business. You need to have them there because that's what gets indexed and then uploaded into the models for them to be able to do the interpretation. In fact, you probably need to have more content there and original content there than you did before. The
Yeah,
other
you
thing,
you you do, but just on that point, Chris, sorry to interrupt. Just on that
no,
point, though, again, this is where organisations need to kind of wisen up and start to change, because now, certainly this year, it is not about your traditional SEO, clearly for the reasons that you
yeah,
just stated, but now it's about the how do I make my content, my services, my kind of blogs, my all that kind of stuff. How do I make that easier, more accessible for an agent to read rather than a person? So it's about now optimizing not for the web or for people browsing to your website, but it's about optimizing for agents. Or how do I, as a business, when someone types into ChatGPT, I need a plumber, how do I, as a local plumber, make sure that I appear in ChatGPT's recommendations? And that's before you've got into the commercialization of it and the ad side and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a fundamental shift happening.
Yeah, there's a thing said about Google about it was about Google search, about search, which was search. They always say it was about search marketing, but actually it was never about marketing. It was about sales. It was kind of like, how do I do search to actually sell you something? Whereas marketing, it's AI search is probably more around marketing because you're understanding what the need is and then matching it. So there's kind of like those kind of things sort of going on in the background. So it's fascinating, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, it is, and I think we'll see. But by the time we get to this point next year, I think we'll have already seen a huge shift in that. We can already see actually that the internet traffic from browser from people is declining. That there are already a number of examples where this is hitting the creative industry, journalism and all this kind of stuff as well. But I think it's an even more fundamental shift. I think it's going to be unrecognizable by this time next year to what we've been used to for effectively the last 10 years, 15 years, something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes and how organizations manage to keep pace with it. I think it's fair to say.
But John, thanks very much for making the time. I appreciate it. I mean, we could probably chat for hours, I think, on this stuff here. And by the time the video comes out, it probably will have changed again. But it's.
Do you know what?
Yeah.
It's well, Chris, I'll tell you this. It's sorry if I've interrupted your sign off for the pod, but.
That's okay.
I did a 2026 predictions blog that got published today. ChatGPT and ads for ChatGPT was in it, and which got announced 2 days ago. I was like, gosh, I can't even wait a week.
Yeah,
I wrote it a week ago, and already it's starting to come true. That's the kind of pace of change that we've got, isn't it? So.
Well, that's what we're up against. As humans, that's what we're up against. So we're just going to keep on top of it. But John, thanks very much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Pleasure.
Thanks.